There'll be various ones for them wherever you are in the world. It's about finding your local one, but definitely a chance of a light drizzle with the other forecasts haven't told us about in the afternoon. Then start to think, okay, maybe we'll get away with a little sail in the first evening before the one. Hey everybody, I'm Stuart. I'm one of Ardent Training's instructors and content creators. And I'm going to be talking to you later on this evening about what weather forecast. Now this is the latest in our newly released Masterclass series of webinars that we're producing with Ardent Training. And we've got various other webinars going on as well, where we let our students know more about our courses and all about how we integrate into the RYA syllabus. So if you want to know any questions about all of that, or indeed you have questions relating to this webinar that we're going to talk to just now, then head along to our website, ardent-training.com, and you can find all the answers there. You can get in touch with our instructors, you can use the live chat and chat to our instructors in real time as well. Now back to this evening, what weather forecast? It's a really popular question that's asked both from our students and when we're actually out on the water ourselves from the crew on our boats. Okay, and so we're going to delve a little bit deeper into why we can't just open up our phone, check our favourite weather forecast, and we're going to be happy with that. So yeah, let's start talking about what weather forecasts and why they're important. Yeah, I quite like this question of what weather forecast that we're going to do this evening, because a lot of people will ask it when we're on the boats together, and everybody then gets involved in the conversation and everyone's like, oh, I use this and I use that. And I just don't think the answer is quite as simple as that, which is why it's nice to just take a little bit of a deeper dive. So yeah, thanks for joining us all this evening. Just to give you a little insight into how we're going to break up this evening, it's going to be a two-part presentation. So the first part of it is going to be thinking about which weather forecasts and why. Then we're going to do a little kind of case study example to show you how we can actually do it and use it in real life. So you can go away and make use of what we learn this evening. What weather forecasts? So yeah, as I said earlier on, it's often asked questions, and the crew on the boats will often answer with a variety of internet sites and apps. And everyone will be getting their phones out and they'll be like, oh, this is the one I use, look at this. That's all great. And it all just adds to that, everybody learning and learning about new tools to use and other bits and pieces. But it's always not quite as simple as just going onto your phone, clicking your app and using your favourite weather service. As we are mariners, the best thing for us is the inshore waters forecast. Now I've got a map here, or a picture here, of the British Isles and the inshore waters forecasts associated with them. You get them all around the world. Every country or area will have their own take on what the inshore waters forecast are. I think in recent times, with the advent of the internet, and as I say, using all these apps and everything, then the inshore waters forecast can sometimes get forgotten about, because rather than listening to your VHF and getting the latest inshore waters forecast, or waiting for 7:10, 8:10, whenever it comes on, everybody just goes to their phone and checks their favourite app. Whereas actually, the inshore waters forecast is always going to be our best bet. Why is it our best bet? Well, it's got human input and it's specifically detailed for the maritime waters that we're sailing in. It's not a land-based forecast, okay? So that's why our inshore waters forecast is always going to be the best. So should we just use inshore waters forecast? Not exactly. The reason being is we want to build up our own picture and our own overview so that we can understand exactly what's happening. If we're in, say, Area 2, that's a pretty big area. It stretches from the northern tip up near Peterhead and Aberdeen all the way down to the border between Scotland and England. So that's a pretty huge area. So if you're down in one corner and you've got the inshore waters forecast, it might be slightly different in your area than it is for someone else sailing out at Peterhead or Aberdeen. Okay, so that's why we want to use other forecasts and other sources as well. Now we also need to think about what do we actually need our forecast for. The Inshore Waters forecast is only a 24-hour forecast, although it does have another 24-hour outlook extending it to 48 hours. So that's great, but it's going to be no good if we're going on a 5-day voyage. Even if our 5-day voyage is staying in coastal waters, we still want to know what's going to be happening 3, 4, 5 days in advance. So we need to think about what it is we're actually needing our forecast for. If we're going to have a week's sailing holiday, then at the start of the week, the Inshore Waters forecast will be great for the first day. But when we're thinking about where we want to be on days 3 and 4, we need to look at that long range forecast. So what do we suggest? And I'm sure everyone's going to look at that and think, oh no, that's not what I use, and oh, I use something different. It doesn't matter which one you use, okay? But what we want to do is use forecasts that cover the different areas. That's what's important. Now, the 4 areas here that I've taken is the inshore waters, which we've just discussed. I've also taken the local weather. So that is the little picture on this slide is from XC weather. But you've got stuff like Wind Guru, you've got your BBC forecast, your Met Office, or whatever country you're in, the local, essentially land forecast. It's always good to have a look at a surface pressure chart. We all might not know how to read a surface pressure chart, but that comes in both the Day Skipper, in fact, of all the Day Skipper Fast Track and Yachtmaster Theory courses online with Ardent Training, we cover our surface pressure charts, okay? So we can learn more about them, and we can learn how we can really get to grips with them and pull some of the weather information out that's going to help us. And the final one is our wind map. In the bottom left of the pictures is from a website called Windy. We can use that as well, and it just gives us a lovely pictorial overview of what the wind is doing. And then we can join all these together. So let's have a little look in more detail at some of these. And I've kind of just answered this question here, but why? Well, we want to look at the local scale. So we want our local forecasts. We want marine specific. So we've got our inshore waters, but we want our overview. So that comes from both our surface pressure chart and something like the Windy pictorial view of the wind. Inshore waters, okay? What does the inshore waters tell us? Gives us an overview, it gives us a forecast time, and then it gives us an area forecast. As we saw on one of the first slides, we can get area forecasts for the whole of our coastlines. You can see this one's from a week ago. This one's not up to date. When we look at the example later on, we'll have an up-to-date one. But this was the general situation a week ago, and it's important to always note the issue time. So it's issued at 1200 UTC on Sunday the 17th of September. So yeah, whenever we're getting our inshore waters forecast, always get our issue time. And then we've got our 24-hour forecast. Inshore waters is always given as the wind, the sea state, the weather, and the visibility. I'm not going to go specifically into every forecast. Again, that's something we can learn about more on the courses themselves. But just showing you what the forecast gives us. So here we've got a 24-hour forecast, and we've got the outlook for the following 24 hours. Again, wind, sea state, weather, visibility. So we've had a look at the inshore waters. We then want to look at our local weather. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier on, we've got XC, we've got BBC, we've got the Met Office. There's no preference. You find which one that you prefer, which you like, as long as you're taking one of the forecasts. The beauty about the local weather forecasts is they're in hourly or 3-hourly forms. Okay, so we get that forecast broken up just a little bit more, as opposed to the inshore waters, it's what's happening in 12 hours. And while we do have some words within that, imminent, soon, and later, to break up the timescales, it's not quite as precise as what we'll get from our local sites. BBC weather and Met Office, despite them both being British, they won't give you the same forecast because BBC gets their weather from Meteo Group, which is a European company, whereas Met Office are all in-house. So just a wee little side note for you there. My personal preference, I just tend to, when I'm looking at for my local weather, I go to XC weather. However, I only use XC weather for wind. I tend not to pay too much attention to the actual weather it forecasts. I find it not the best, and I'll use other weather forecasts. And this is us starting to think about using different forecasts and finding which one gives you the information that's best, and then pulling it all together to give you your own forecast. let's have a little look at them together. Why do we want to look at them together? Well, we want to build our knowledge of the forecast and create this overall picture that I'm talking about. So we're looking at them together. So we've got a 24-hour forecast from the inshore waters, and we've got essentially the 24 hours from XC weather there. Now this time I am going to talk about the forecast, okay? Wind easterly or southeasterly 3 to 5, veering westerly and northwesterly 4 to 6 later. Come down to the XC tables. Easterly, east-northeast, it's dropping to begin with, drops overnight, and then comes back up and veers to the northwest-west and raises the next day. Go back to our inshore waters forecast, easterly to southeasterly 3 to 5, veering westerly or northwesterly 4 to 6. That pretty much adds up, yeah? If they're starting to add up, then we're starting to think that's what's going to happen. However, the inshore waters is just 3 to 5. It doesn't tell us when that's going to happen. Whereas XC weather tends to suggest that it's going to be 5 to begin with, then it's going to ease off to a 4, then a 3, and then it's going to veer and pick back up again. So that's, again, just starting to get that little bit more information, and we're adding to the knowledge that the inshore waters forecast has already given us. Sea state, smooth or slight, nothing in that about the XC weather, so we need our inshore waters. The weather, rain, it's saying rain, but not too much of it in the first part of the forecast. Then in the middle part of the forecast, or the middle to end, lots of rain. So we can be then starting to think, okay, maybe we'll get away with a little sail in the first evening before the worst of the weather comes in. And visibility, moderate or good, occasionally poor. When is it going to be occasionally poor? In that heavier rain, which we know is going to be in the early hours of the morning, thanks to XC. So it's showing you what we can do to expand our forecast knowledge. Rather than focusing on one or the other, we can combine them together. Just before I move on, I'm just going to show you where I've got this information from. Of course, I've pulled this out last weekend when I was making up some of this, so we're not going to be looking at the exact same data. metoffice.gov.uk, and then we can get to the inshore waters forecast. And I've selected Lyme Regis to Land's End, including the Isles of Scilly. And we've got a 24-hour and an outlook down here. Again, up here we've got a general situation, and we've got an issue time of 1800 UTC on Monday the 25th of September. And we'll just switch over to XC. Again, it's looking at the same area down on the south coast of England. We've got XC weather, we've got the wind and everything there. xcweather.co.uk, and you can just type in where you want your forecast, press the get forecast, and that's you. Moving on. Surface pressure charts. We can get these from the Met Office again. This is the up-to-date one. This is, again, metoffice.gov.uk, surface pressure. And this is what's going to be happening at midnight tonight. So yeah, close isobars all across the UK, and that cold front coming in. So all the forecasts that we're looking at, we're starting to see how they match up. And the wind overview. So this one, again, this one comes from windy.com, and this does the whole world, this one, so you can go wherever you are in the world for it, and you can see what's happening with the wind. It's actually a really cool website just to look at. I've included the scale here. All the colours change with what the strength of the wind is, and the arrows point in the direction of the wind's blowing. So the warmer the colour, the stronger the wind. The colder the colour, the less the wind. That all comes from, as I say, windy.com. And this is what's happening at, well, that's 2300 tonight. I'll just pop it back to 8 o'clock tonight. It's the same 3-hour forecast. But for what we were looking at and what's happening now, there's your cold front to the west of the British Isles, where you've got that massive change in wind direction. Again, we can compare these two, building our knowledge, expanding our picture even further. So it's a little bit confusing in the pictures we've got here, because when I go to the websites, we're looking at the current up-to-date ones. When we look on the slides, they match each other up on the slides, but they're a week old. The beauty with comparing these two weather forecast models or weather forecast sites is if you're ever struggling to understand what the wind's doing or what the fronts are doing on a surface pressure chart, look at it side by side with windy. So you've got your low southwest of Iceland on the surface pressure, Southwest of Iceland, you've got this big low on the wind with some really strong winds to the south of it. Come back to your surface pressure, that's where the isobars are tightest. So you can really start to understand how these surface pressure charts work by using these two together. So if you've never done this and you take one thing away from tonight, this is it. Look at these two and really gain to understand it. You see you've got the big purple occluded front coming off from the eastern tip of Iceland and down and west of the British Isles. That's it there, where it changes from the southerly orange winds to the westerly green winds. That's your veer in the wind. The front is where all the heavy rain will be on that occluded front. What else can we look at to help us build our picture? So we can look at nearby areas. So when I said earlier on about using the inshore waters forecast of where we are, we probably also want to check the inshore waters forecast for the area next to us on both sides, but specifically the side of where the wind's coming from. So if we've got this southwesterly airflow over the UK just now, you want to check the inshore waters forecast area to the west of you as well, because that's where the weather's coming from. And it gives you a little indicator of what might be heading your way. It's also nice to know about what rain, what clouds, and what swell there might be, because they're all other factors that influence our day out on the water. This is the same picture from Windy as it was a week ago. That's that front that came down from Iceland. That's your occluded front. Look at all that rain. It just gives you a real good understanding of what's happening. And you can see that once the front passes, we might lose the rain. Again, it's one of these things of understanding where you are in the whole pressure system as well. We pop the cloud on, you've got the same thing. So you've got that huge band of cloud with the occluded front. The occluded front wraps all the way back round to the centre of the low. And you can see where there's cloud and where there isn't. And the same one for the swell or waves. Again, I've put the scale on the bottom here. So we're talking 6 metre waves out in the North Atlantic, southwest of Iceland even. But they're coming towards the UK. There's also another batch down to the southwest of the British Isles that's probably starting to push up a little bit as well. At the moment, on this picture though, coastal-wise around the British Isles, the sea state and the swell is probably not too bad. It's all quite cold blue colours. So we could have went out for a sail in the knowledge that the sea state wouldn't have been too bad. But a day or two later, then yeah, for sure, you wouldn't be wanting to be out anywhere on that western seaboard. Waves would have been up to 3.5 metres in places, maybe even more, even in coastal waters that were open to the Atlantic. So, what do we have so far? So we looked at inshore waters, we looked at XC weather, we looked at surface pressure, and we looked at Windy. And we got various information from Windy. And I've just got a little table here. You've got what forecast has a human input, what forecast gives us the wind, what forecast tells us about waves or swell or sea conditions, what forecast gives us a localized weather, what forecast gives us an overview, which forecast is marine specific, and which one gives us an hourly view. But yeah, I think it's really good just to think about how we need the 4 or so inputs of different weather forecasts so that we can really make our own picture as accurate and detailed as possible. Just going to do one last little thing before we move on to an example, and that is what else can we look at? So we can look at live readings, we can look out the window, or we're on a boat, we're in the marina, we want to know what's happening. Walk out, get off your boat, walk along to the end of the pontoon, walk out to the end of the breakwater and have a look what's happening. Cannot tell you how many times I've done that and really benefited from it and understanding what's happening actually outside. When you're tied up in the shelter of your marina or your harbour or your anchorage, you don't know what's actually happening out there in your either open sea or open bit of water, sailing water. So be sure to go and check it. But looking out the window, maybe not too common, but certainly more common these days. Everybody gets their phone in the morning, they sit around the breakfast table and they're like, oh look, it's going to rain all day today. It says it's raining. And I've just been outside, walking around, checking the boat, whatever it is in the morning. And it's a beautifully gorgeous sunny day, not a cloud in the sky. I'm like, have you even looked outside yet? So yeah, remember to look out the window, okay? The forecast is that, it's a forecast, what's actually happening. We're on the boat, we can get what's actually happening just by looking and using our eyes. Lots of places will have live readings. This one's from the Solent, so we've got what was happening this afternoon on Bramble Bank. There was 13.9 knots of wind average. The gusts were up at 15, 16 from the west-southwest. What was the forecast? 12 to 13 southwest. Pretty accurate. Barometric pressure 1020.6 millibars, forecast 1020. Great, all going to forecast. If we check the live readings, we've got that live report from what's actually happening out on the water. There'll be various ones for them wherever you are in the world. It's about finding your local one. When I sailed in New Zealand, they had a really great one where it was automated like this Bramble Bank report, but it had its dedicated VHF channel. So it just read out on the VHF channel what was happening, the wind direction and the wind strength. So you just needed to switch the VHF on for 5 minutes. It went round all the different stations and you got a live reading of what was happening. So it was really good. Look out the window. So maybe this day, the forecast was for poor visibility and fog. Yes, it's a bit hazy, but good visibility to go. Conditions are calm. Nothing wrong with getting out there and continuing your day on the water. Whereas the next day, when we walk along to the end of the break, well, we probably shouldn't walk along to the end of the breakwater. But yeah, what we're going to do on that day, we've checked the forecast, we've looked beyond the breakwater. It might all be calm inside the marina, but we're not heading out. You can go and look out, see what's happening at sea. It's very different to what's happening inside your sheltered harbour. Do we have any urgent questions that I can take a quick breather with, Charlie?
Yeah. So Phillips asked, do we know what happened to the coastal waters forecast the BBC used to issue pre-COVID? It was more detailed than the inshore waters forecast, and it often split an inshore area into 2 separate areas. And I'm not too aware of that. I know that we do have our inshore waters forecast, which is separate to our shipping forecast. Our shipping forecast does bigger areas, so bigger sea areas like Fastnet or Rockall, Bailey and Hebrides, which you can get online on the Met Office as well, often on Radio 4 in the morning, I think. And you also get the fishing, extended fishing forecast, which I think is just over the winter months. And that's basically an elongated forecast, which covers 3 days, to my knowledge at least.
Yeah, I'd say the exact same as you. I think that a lot of inshore areas, though, they will split it if the weather is very different. So like the example I gave earlier on, it will maybe say in the northern sector, it will be this, and in the south, it will be this, which makes that forecast for that area very long. But yeah, it does split it up. So basically, almost just going to repeat what I've done, but we're going to look at what's happening tomorrow, Tuesday, the 26th of September. We're going to sail from Portland to Cowes. Cowes is just inside the Isle of Wight here, and that's where we're heading to. And Portland is this little bit here that sticks out at the bottom. It's almost like a little island. It's not, but it almost is. So we're going to sail from there up to Cowes. So it's all in this Sea Area 7, which is Selseybill to Lyme Regis. So first thing we do, inshore waters forecast. Issued at 1200 UTC on Monday the 25th of September, so the 24 hours following. And we've got a southwest backing south or southeast 3 to 5, then veering southwest 4 or 5 later. Sea state slight or moderate. Weather, showers for a time, perhaps thundery. Visibility good, occasionally moderate later. The outlook for the following 24 hours, southwest 4 or 5, becoming variable 3 or less, then southeast 4 or 5 later. So the wind is backing into Wednesday, all the way around to the southeast. We're heading east, so we don't want it to back before we arrive, so we can get a nice downwind sail there. Sea state, slight or moderate. Weather mainly fair, visibility good. You won't be able to remember every little bit, but you can think about what is the basics of that forecast. What we're going to check next, our local forecast. So this is for Cowes, for Tuesday the 26th of September. It's light in the morning from the south, southern sectors. It builds through the day, southwest. 13 to 18, 21 knots in the gusts. So yeah, a steady 4, gusting 5, even gusting the top of a 5 in Cowes. If I'm starting to see that on the land at Cowes, I'm going to be thinking on the water, that's going to be gusting a 6. Because remember, this is a land forecast. Let's pop those two together and let's just see if they match up. It was southwest backing south or southeast, 3 to 5. That's kind of just now, today, because this was valid from midday today. And then it's veering southwest 4 or 5 later. Well, on XC, you can see that veer is happening in the early hours of the morning. So later was 12 or more hours, which is after midnight tonight. So there's the veer, happens through the early hours, 4, 7, 10 o'clock. It's still veering in the morning, and it's starting to pick up to that 4 or 5. And this one's even potentially saying, and we might get gusts into the 6. Sea state we don't need to be too concerned about at the moment because XC doesn't tell us anything about that. But the weather says showers for a time, perhaps thundery in the first 24 hours. Well, there's only one little sign of that for us tomorrow, 0.1 of a mil at 10 o'clock. Just bear that in mind. And then after midday tomorrow, it says southwest 4 or 5, becoming variable 3 or less, then southeast 4 or 5 later. Well, look what happens on XC. After 7 o'clock tomorrow night, it drops down, starts to ease off, it goes round to the west-southwest. That's going to be the start of our variable coming, and the wind's going to drop off. And the weather, mainly fair, and that's from midday tomorrow, it's saying mainly fair. So at the moment, they're starting to match up a bit. What can we tell from joining the two of them together? Well, we might get that thundery shower at 10 o'clock-ish in the morning, potentially. And we might get a little bit more than our 4 or 5 in the gusts. Let's look at our overview. This is a surface pressure chart, valid for 1200 UTC tomorrow. The black line that is kind of over East Anglia and London tomorrow midday, that is a pressure trough. So that is bringing unsettled, squally conditions. But this is midday, so it's already past where we're going to be. So that is what gives you that 10 o'clock rain or thundery showers occurring in our later period, in the 24-hour period we're currently in. That is the culprit there, that little black pressure trough. The isobars also aren't too close together here. In fact, the further away we go from the British Isles there, they're starting to come further apart. So again, it's adding up, shouldn't be more than a 4 or 5. We'll maybe just getting that gust of a 6 off the land in the Solent as it funnels up the west Solent. Again, let's look at that on the windy. I've chosen a spot just off the western tip of the Isle of Wight there. It's showing you 18 knots of wind. You've got the scale and the colours there again. And you can also, this is 12 o'clock tomorrow is the forecast. Everything's adding up here. We've got this southwesterly flow at 12 o'clock and it's pretty steady. So it's all the same colour in the whole area that we're looking to sail in tomorrow. So that's adding up to being, yes, it's going to be a good day to sail. No problem. On the western side of the mainland Britain here, that's your front that we were looking at before. This bit over to the east, that's your pressure trough. But where we are, down on between Portland Bill and Cowes, the rain's passed by midday and this doesn't look like too much coming. If anything, it's just going to be a very light bit of drizzle later in the afternoon. But on the whole, it's going to be dry, but definitely a chance of a light drizzle, which the other forecasts haven't told us about in the afternoon. So this is another little bit of information that we can bring in. And finally here, the swell. Huge amounts of swell coming in from the Atlantic. That's 3.5, 4 metres down at the Isles of Scilly, but it is only saying 1.1 metre off the Isle of Wight. Now what you'll find when it's like this is the long swell will still find its way up the channel. Now I'm not saying it's going to be 3 to 4 metres of swell, but I would expect the waves and the swell to be a little bit greater in and around that area that we're planning to sail tomorrow. So I'm thinking that our slight to moderate sea state is probably a little bit of an underestimation, especially slight. The sea state is going to be moderate minimum, potentially even getting into a kind of rough sea, especially until the tide turns to head west, the tide turns to head east at 2 o'clock, because we're going to have wind against tide and this bigger bits of swell coming in. The period of the swell is 5 seconds. That's tiny. That's really small. So the waves are going to be almost on top of each other. So it's going to be a little bit bumpy out in the English Channel tomorrow. Cloud cover, look at that. Midday, once that first band of rain's cleared out the way, we actually might get a period without cloud. We're hopefully going to get that couple of hours of sunshine in the middle of the day while we have our lunch, but then we're going to get that next little band of cloud coming in and maybe a little bit of afternoon light drizzle. That gives us a lot of extra information. Squally pressure trough passes early in the day. Rain band late morning with a slight chance of showers later in the day. Big Atlantic swells likely funneling up the channel and consistent winds of a southwest 5. That's the two things we found on the left from our inshore waters and local forecast, and on the right from our overview surface pressure and what we're using, windy. What happens if we put them two together? We've got our own personalised view. So it's likely southwesterly 5, slight or moderate sea and a likely larger following swell. Be aware of the morning squally pressure trough that's going to pass through and a potential late morning shower. Outside the showers, it's actually going to be a nice day. We're probably going to get some sunshine and it's not going to be thick layers of cloud, which some of the forecasts were potentially suggesting. before we got to bring them all together. So yeah, we've just made up our own forecast of taking everything into account from all our different forecasts, and now we have a much better idea of what's going to happen during our sail from Portland to Cowes on the Isle of Wight tomorrow. The conclusion from that: Inshore waters was clearly the overall gave us the closest view, but without having looked at all the other forecasts, we wouldn't have known of the pressure trough, we wouldn't have known the temperature, we wouldn't have known of the larger sea state, and we wouldn't have known about the more localised and rain squall forecast times, or indeed that potential drizzle that's going to happen tomorrow afternoon. But yeah, hopefully that's been a good overview for you to see why it's so important to not just use one forecast, but to pull lots of different forecasts together, but also how we can learn from the different forecasts to learn about weather phenomena that another forecast might not be telling us. So yeah, not just so that we can build a bigger picture, but so that we don't miss anything as well. So thanks very much. I'll let Charlie introduce the questions to you.
Thanks very much, Stuart. That was awesome. It's always really satisfying putting together a few different forecasts, going through it systematically like that, and especially with synoptic charts, making them actually make sense, comparing them to windy, to my mind at least, makes it really real, brings them to life a bit. So it's really satisfying to see that. So thank you very much, Stuart. We'll just have a quick look at the poll.
I was just doing that myself.
So we asked, be honest, what is your most checked weather forecast? The options being surface pressure chart, inshore waters or shipping forecast, windy, XE weather, wind guru or the local Met Office, predict wind and other. Windy is the winner with 6 votes. XE, wind guru, local Met Office all have 5 votes. So the colourful app that's nice to look at wins, unsurprisingly, and I did also vote for that.
Yeah, really interesting that nobody's first go-to is the inshore waters forecast. And we've just proved that the inshore waters forecast is actually the most accurate.
If we don't have any more questions, then you can always get in touch with us, give us a call on the phone number, use the live chat feature, or send us an email. It's always nice to have real life questions to answer as well as the RWA exercises. Yeah, any sort of real life advice or questions you have, then don't hesitate to get in touch.
Thanks for coming along, everybody. And yeah, as Charlie says, any questions, fire them our way.
We will continue our webinars. So yeah, keep an eye out and we'll see you at the next one. But thanks Stuart, and thanks everyone for attending. It's been great.
Okay, Charlie, when the house bears about 270 degrees.
Information to work out our distance from the lighthouse and use that.
We might be perfectly on track, but if we're not on time...
Have a look, I've got my phone here at the effects it has on our steering compass. Our echo sound is working, we can find a contour and follow it nicely into port.
Our left hand is pointing towards the centre of the low.